The sun had barely risen when Aarav Patel stepped into the sleek, glass-walled building that would now be his workplace. He'd worked hard for this moment, climbing the ranks of the corporate world, earning accolades for his innovative marketing strategies and winning international business awards. But this new position, director of the branch, was a milestone, not just for his career, but for the kind of company he wanted to build. Inside the bustling office, employees filed in, gossiping about the new leadership. Aarav knew the rumors would spread quickly. A man of Indian descent, a marketing expert, appointed to lead a major branch of a well-established company. His arrival, despite his impressive resume, would certainly ruffle some feathers. He had heard whispers of how people from different backgrounds sometimes struggled to fit into corporate spaces, and he knew he wasn't immune to such biases. As he walked past the rows of desks, heads turned. Some employees flashed smiles, others quickly looked down at their computer screens. He caught a few skeptical glances, and he knew immediately that some were questioning his authority based solely on his ethnicity. But Aarav was no stranger to such challenges. He had faced adversity before, both in the workplace and in his personal life, and he had always emerged stronger. Aarav entered the conference room where his first official meeting would take place. The room was filled with a mix of veteran employees and newcomers, all eyes on him as he stood in front of the whiteboard. The air felt thick with expectation. He could feel the weight of their scrutiny, but instead of shrinking back, he stood tall. "Good morning, everyone," Aarav began, his voice steady, measured. "My name is Aarav Patel, and I'm honored to be here with you today. As the new director of this branch, my goal is simple: to make this office a place where respect, collaboration, and growth are at the forefront of everything we do." He paused, making eye contact with several members of the team. Most of them were nodding along, but there was one figure who didn't seem to share the same enthusiasm. Mr. Johnson, a senior employee, sat at the back of the room, his arms crossed over his chest. His eyes, though not openly hostile, narrowed slightly as Aarav spoke. Aarav had noticed him earlier. Johnson had been one of the few not to offer a handshake upon his arrival. "Now, I know change can be difficult," Aarav continued, "but change is essential for progress. And together, I believe we can achieve great things here. Let's work together to create an environment where every person, no matter their background, can thrive." There was a brief, uncomfortable silence after his words. Aarav could feel the tension building, but he refused to back down. It was clear that Mr. Johnson wasn't the only one with doubts. Aarav had prepared for this. He had known there would be resistance, but he wasn't about to let it stand in the way of his vision. Finally, Mr. Johnson spoke up, his voice cutting through the quiet like a blade. "So, you're telling me that everyone here is equal, no matter what?" he asked, a hint of sarcasm in his tone. "Is that really how this is going to work?" Aarav remained calm, his gaze steady. He had expected this. "Yes, Mr. Johnson," he replied. "That is exactly what I'm saying. Everyone deserves to be treated with respect, regardless of their race, gender, or background. We are all part of this team, and we all have something valuable to contribute." Mr. Johnson shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable with Aarav's directness. "Well, I'm not sure I agree with you on that," he muttered under his breath, but just loud enough for the room to hear. A few employees shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, but no one spoke up. Aarav's pulse quickened, but he held his ground. He knew the road ahead would be filled with challenges, but this was the first step toward the culture change he hoped to bring to the company. "I understand that change can be difficult, but I promise you this: my door is always open. We will have open discussions, and if any of you feel uncomfortable or have concerns, you can come to me directly." The room remained tense for a moment, but Aarav could sense that his message had landed. Some employees were nodding, clearly approving of his approach. The others, though more reserved, would need time to adjust. "Let's move forward with an open mind," Aarav said, concluding the meeting. "Thank you all for your time. I look forward to working with each of you." As the employees filed out of the room, some approached him with friendly handshakes and words of encouragement. But Aarav couldn't help but notice that Mr. Johnson stayed behind, lingering by the door, staring at him with a hard expression. Aarav met his gaze calmly, knowing that this was just the beginning of what would likely be a long and challenging journey. But it was a journey he was ready to face head-on. The first few days of Aarav Patel's tenure at the company were a whirlwind of meetings, introductions, and navigating the fine line between asserting his authority and building rapport with his new team. Despite the outward smiles and polite handshakes, the air was thick with skepticism. Some employees warmed to his leadership, eager for the change he promised, but others, particularly Mr. Johnson, continued to cast doubt on Aarav's ability to lead effectively. On the fourth day, Aarav was reviewing the branch's financial projections when his phone buzzed with an alert. It was an email from Mr. Harris, the senior executive overseeing operations. Aarav, the budget cuts are necessary. We need to downsize the team by 20%. Make the necessary decisions quickly. This is non-negotiable. Aarav's mind raced as he read through the email. The numbers didn't lie. The company was facing a tough period ahead. Layoffs were imminent, and as director, it was his responsibility to trim the team. But he refused to let the cuts be arbitrary or rooted in bias. He would handle this with the same fairness and respect that he had promised to bring to the workplace. He stood up and walked over to the window, watching the busy city streets below. The responsibility weighed heavily on him, but he had made a promise to himself and to his team that he wouldn't let office politics and personal prejudices cloud his judgment. He would approach this decision with empathy, considering the individuals behind the numbers. Later that day, the tension between him and Mr. Johnson bubbled over. Aarav had just finished a meeting with a potential client when he noticed Mr. Johnson waiting by his office door, arms crossed, an air of impatience around him. "Mr. Patel," Johnson started, his voice sharp, "I don't know how you expect us to follow you. You've been here, for days? You're changing everything. How do you know what's best for this company? For our team?" Aarav met his gaze, remaining calm despite the clear challenge. "I understand this is difficult for you, Mr. Johnson. Change is never easy. But I'm here to make the best decisions for everyone, and that includes making tough calls. If you have concerns, my door is open, but I need you to trust me." Mr. Johnson's expression darkened. "Trust you? You haven't even earned it yet. Maybe you should just stick to your marketing awards and leave the leadership to those of us who've been here for years." The word stung, but Aarav held his ground. "Mr. Johnson, I'm not here to take anyone's job. I'm here to make sure we all have a job to keep, and that we can work in an environment where everyone is respected and valued. I want to help this company grow, and I want you to be part of that vision. But I won't tolerate the kind of behavior I've seen from you and a few others." The room was thick with silence as the two men stood there, eyes locked. Aarav could feel the weight of the confrontation, but he refused to back down. "Look, I know you don't like me," Aarav said finally, his voice steady. "But I need you to understand something. We are all equal here. The color of my skin, my accent, none of that should matter. What matters is how we perform, how we work together. That's the kind of leader I strive to be." Mr. Johnson let out a bitter laugh. "You don't get it, do you? You're not one of us. And you never will be." Aarav's heart clenched, but he kept his face neutral. He wasn't going to let Johnson's racism undermine his resolve. "We'll see about that," he said quietly, before turning and walking back to his desk. That night, as Aarav sat alone in his office, reviewing more budget cuts and staffing reports, he couldn't shake the feeling that the path ahead would be more challenging than he had anticipated. He had expected resistance. What leader hadn't? But the open hostility from Mr. Johnson was something he hadn't prepared for. Despite the tension, Aarav knew he couldn't afford to let this personal conflict distract him from his larger mission. The branch needed stability, and it was his job to make sure it wasn't undermined by individual grievances. Still, he couldn't ignore the pain of being judged for something he had no control over, something so deeply ingrained in society that it was hard to escape. The following morning, as Aarav walked into the office, he was greeted by more subdued faces. His interactions with Mr. Johnson had clearly left their mark, but he wasn't going to let one employee's behavior dictate the culture he was trying to build. At the start of the next team meeting, Aarav addressed the group, his tone measured but firm. "I know things have been difficult. We're all facing challenges, but we're facing them together," he said, making eye contact with each employee, including Mr. Johnson. "I need everyone here to be committed to the same goal, a workplace built on mutual respect, inclusivity, and fairness. This is not just a company policy, it's the way we will work together moving forward." Mr. Johnson sat at the back, arms crossed. But this time, Aarav sensed a shift. Maybe the battle wasn't won yet, but he had made his stance clear. He would not let racism or hatred dictate his leadership. Aarav Patel had always known that leadership wasn't just about giving orders, it was about setting an example. The tension between him and Mr. Johnson hadn't subsided since their confrontation. If anything, it had deepened. The rest of the office had begun to feel the ripple effect of their conflict, but Aarav was determined not to let it define his time as director. He spent the next few days focusing on the bigger picture, reviewing quarterly reports, meeting with department heads, and working on strategies to address the financial strain the branch was under. He knew the pressure of the budget cuts loomed large, But he couldn't afford to lose sight of the culture he wanted to build. He couldn't let Mr. Johnson's hostility, or anyone else's, distract him from that. But the strain between the two men was undeniable. Mr. Johnson continued to undermine Aarav's authority in subtle ways, making snide remarks in meetings or questioning his decisions in front of others. Aarav had expected this, but it didn't make it any easier to deal with. One afternoon, Aarav decided it was time to address the situation head-on. He called a meeting with his leadership team, but this time, he invited all of the department heads, including Mr. Johnson. The goal was simple: to communicate openly about the state of the branch and the challenges ahead. As the meeting began, Aarav stood at the front, his posture confident but calm. "Good afternoon, everyone. I want to take a moment to acknowledge that this has been a difficult few weeks for all of us. But we're here to work through these challenges together." He paused, allowing the words to settle in the room. "I know there's a lot of uncertainty. We're facing budget cuts, and that's not easy. But I believe that if we work together, we can come out of this stronger. The goal is simple. We need to find a way to keep the team strong and focused on our clients, no matter what happens in the coming months." Aarav glanced over at Mr. Johnson, who was sitting at the back of the room, arms crossed and expression unreadable. Aarav could feel the tension, but he refused to let it deter him. "I understand that change can be difficult," Aarav continued, his voice steady. "But the one thing I ask from all of you is that we approach this as a team. No matter your position or background, everyone deserves respect. We all have a role to play in making this company a success." There was a long pause, and Aarav could feel the weight of his words hanging in the air. He knew that some of his employees might not fully agree with him, but he hoped this meeting would help shift the dynamic in the room. He wasn't just asking for compliance, he was asking for understanding. To his surprise, it was Mr. Harris, one of the more senior members of the team, who spoke first. "Aarav," he said, his voice quieter than usual, "I think you're right. I've been around long enough to see how a toxic culture can destroy a company. We need to get on the same page if we're going to survive this." The room was silent for a moment. Then another voice spoke up, this time from a junior marketing coordinator. "I agree," she said. "We can't keep pretending like there isn't something wrong. We all have to do our part to make this place better." Aarav smiled, feeling a glimmer of hope. For the first time, it seemed like the team was coming together, ready to move past their differences. But his eyes drifted back to Mr. Johnson, who was still sitting in silence, his face unreadable. Aarav took a deep breath, deciding it was time to address the elephant in the room. "And Mr. Johnson," he said, locking eyes with him, "I understand that this has been a difficult transition. But I need you to understand something. We are all here to work toward the same goal. The color of my skin, my background, those shouldn't matter in the workplace. I will not tolerate any form of disrespect or division among us." The silence in the room felt almost deafening as everyone awaited Johnson's response. He didn't speak for a moment, his eyes narrowing as he processed Aarav's words. Then, to everyone's surprise, he finally spoke. "You're right," he muttered, his tone low but sincere. "I've been difficult. I let my biases cloud my judgment, and for that, I apologize." Aarav was taken aback. It wasn't a grand speech, but it was a start. It was something. And in that moment, Aarav felt a small but significant shift in the room. "We're all human," Aarav said softly, meeting Mr. Johnson's gaze. "We all make mistakes. What matters is how we move forward from here." Mr. Johnson nodded, though he didn't speak again. The rest of the meeting went on without further incident, and by the end of the day, Aarav had a sense of cautious optimism. There was still work to be done, but today had been a breakthrough, an important step toward building the kind of company culture he had envisioned. As he left the office that evening, Aarav took a moment to reflect. Change was never easy, especially when it came to entrenched beliefs and long-standing prejudices. But Aarav knew that the work he was doing wasn't just about turning around the company's financial situation, it was about transforming the people within it. He had won one small victory today, but the battle for respect, equality, and understanding was far from over. The days after the breakthrough meeting were filled with a cautious optimism. Aarav Patel had no illusions. His leadership would be tested over and over again, but for the first time since taking the role as director, he felt a sense of progress. Mr. Johnson, while still distant, had at least acknowledged his own biases and apologized. That was a small victory in a sea of challenges, and Aarav was determined to build on it. Despite the improved atmosphere, the weight of the looming layoffs hung over the office like a dark cloud. The financial strain on the branch was undeniable, and with the budget cuts imminent, everyone knew that difficult decisions were coming. Aarav wasn't one to shy away from tough calls, But he had always believed that layoffs weren't just about numbers on a spreadsheet. They were about real people with real lives, and he would make every effort to ensure those decisions were handled with respect and fairness. The pressure from Mr. Harris, the senior executive, was unrelenting. Every time Aarav checked his email, there was another reminder about the need to trim the team. Despite his assurances that he would handle it thoughtfully, the reality of the situation was overwhelming. The team had already been stretched thin, and now, with the prospect of layoffs, the air was thick with uncertainty. One afternoon, Aarav met with his leadership team to discuss the next steps. As the group gathered around the conference table, the tension was palpable. No one spoke at first, as if each person was waiting for someone else to break the silence. "All right," Aarav said, breaking the quiet. "We all know why we're here. The budget cuts are forcing us to make some difficult decisions. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This isn't going to be easy. But we have to approach this with compassion, not just numbers." He paused, making sure everyone was paying attention. "I've already reviewed the staff reports, and I'm confident that we can make the necessary cuts without compromising the quality of our work. But I need your help. I need you to think about the people behind the positions, not just the positions themselves." Mr. Harris, who had been quiet up until this point, spoke up. "I understand the sentiment, Aarav, but we need to make cuts where we can. The bottom line is that we're losing money, and the company can't afford to keep everyone. We need to focus on who can deliver results, not just who's been here the longest." Aarav nodded, understanding the reality of the situation. But he wasn't ready to let go of his core belief that everyone deserved a fair chance. "I agree that we need to prioritize results. But we also need to take into account the potential for growth. Some of the people on this list might not have the results we want now, but with the right guidance and support, they can get there." Mr. Harris leaned back in his chair, clearly unconvinced. "That's a nice ideal, but at the end of the day, this is a business. We can't afford to keep people who aren't performing." Aarav felt a spark of frustration, but he kept his voice calm. "I know it's a business, and I'm not suggesting we keep anyone who isn't contributing. But I am asking you to trust me to make these decisions with both the company and the people in mind. I'll be the one to deliver the final list, but I'll do it with respect, and I'll make sure those who are let go are treated with dignity." The room fell silent again. Aarav could see the skepticism in the eyes of his team, but he could also see a glimmer of respect. He knew that leading wasn't just about making decisions, it was about earning the trust of the people around you, even when you disagreed. This wasn't going to be easy, but Aarav was prepared to fight for the team he believed in. Later that evening, Aarav sat in his office, reviewing the final list. He felt the weight of every name on the page, each one representing a person with hopes, dreams, and responsibilities. The thought of having to let any of them go filled him with a sense of dread. But this was the job he had taken on, and he couldn't let fear stop him from doing what needed to be done. The next morning, he gathered the team for an all-staff meeting. As the employees filed in, Aarav could sense the tension. Everyone knew the layoffs were coming, but no one knew who would be affected. Aarav cleared his throat before speaking, his voice firm but compassionate. "I know many of you are anxious about what's to come," he began. "The past few weeks have been difficult for all of us, and the financial reality we're facing is hard to ignore. But I want to assure you that we are doing everything in our power to make sure that no one is left behind. I will be meeting with each of you individually in the coming days to discuss your role and how we move forward together." There was a long pause, but Aarav could see that his words were having an effect. The tension in the room started to ease, and for the first time, the team seemed united in the face of uncertainty. "I want to thank you all for your hard work and dedication," he continued. "We're not just going to survive this, we're going to emerge stronger, together." As the meeting adjourned, Aarav felt a small sense of relief. The hardest part was still ahead, but he knew he was doing the right thing. He had taken the first steps toward securing the future of the branch, not just financially, but in creating a workplace where every employee, no matter their background or role, was valued. The weight of the decision to lay off employees had not been easy for Aarav Patel, but he knew it had to be done. After hours of reviewing performance reports, conducting one-on-one meetings, and making what felt like impossible choices, the final list was made. He had done everything in his power to make the process as fair as possible, treating each individual with the respect they deserved. The names of those who would be leaving the company had been decided, and soon, the news would be delivered. It was a dreary Thursday morning when Aarav stood before his team in the conference room, preparing to announce the results of the layoffs. The tension in the air was thick, and Aarav could feel the collective anxiety of the room. Every employee had been bracing for the news, but no one knew who would be affected. Thank you for coming in today, Aarav began, his voice steady but carrying a weight of its own. I know that this has been a difficult time for all of us. The decision we've had to make is never easy. I want to assure you that we've approached this process with as much thought and care as possible. Every effort has been made to ensure that the decisions we've made are in the best interest of the company and the people involved. There was an uncomfortable silence as Aarav paused, scanning the room. He could see a few employees tense up, nervous glances exchanged between colleagues. This was the moment of truth. Aarav had carefully considered every name on the list, but he knew that the reality of the situation would leave some hurt. He looked over at Mr. Johnson, who stood at the back of the room, arms crossed, a neutral expression on his face. Aarav had yet to see Mr. Johnson truly embrace the changes in the company, and he knew that the man's attitude could make or break the team's future. But today wasn't about Mr. Johnson, it was about his people, his team. Over the next few days, I will be meeting with each individual affected by the layoffs, Aarav continued. You'll be given a full explanation of the decisions, and we will do everything we can to assist you in finding new opportunities, both inside and outside the company. No one leaves here without the support they deserve. The room was quiet. There were no gasps, no immediate reactions, just the dull thrum of anticipation. Aarav knew that the hardest part was still ahead. These were the moments when leadership would truly be tested. The decision had been made, but how it was communicated, how it was handled, would make all the difference. As the meeting adjourned, Aarav felt an unexpected sense of relief. The worst of the announcement was over, but what came next would truly define his leadership. Over the next few days, Aarav met individually with each employee on the list. It was the hardest thing he had ever done, watching the shock, the disbelief, the heartbreak as he delivered the news. But even in those difficult moments, he never once wavered in his commitment to treat each person with respect. He offered words of encouragement, assurances that their skills were valuable, and helped each individual plan their next steps. The layoffs were a blow to the team, but Aarav knew that how he handled them would set the tone for the future. By the end of the week, Aarav had completed all of the meetings. It was a bitter pill for everyone involved, but he had hoped, even if just for a moment, that his approach had made it a little easier to swallow. Meanwhile, the rest of the team seemed to be reacting in unexpected ways. The office dynamics were shifting. Some employees, particularly those who had been hesitant about Aarav's leadership, began to show signs of more openness. The culture of division that had once seemed so ingrained was starting to unravel, slowly but surely. One afternoon, as Aarav was wrapping up a meeting, he was approached by Sarah, the junior marketing coordinator who had spoken up during their earlier meeting. She was one of the newer hires, and Aarav had noticed how she had seemed to take the changes to heart. "I just wanted to say thank you," Sarah said, her voice sincere, "for the way you handled everything, especially the layoffs. It wasn't easy, but you made it clear that you cared about everyone, and that made a difference. It made me realize that this place could be something really different, a place where people actually matter." Aarav smiled, feeling a sense of pride swell inside him. "Thank you, Sarah. That means more to me than you know." It wasn't just Sarah. He had noticed subtle changes in the office. Employees were more willing to collaborate, more willing to offer ideas. The air was less tense, less hostile. And though the scars of the layoffs would linger, Aarav could feel the seeds of a more positive, inclusive culture beginning to take root. Later that afternoon, Aarav received an unexpected email from Mr. Johnson, who had been noticeably quieter in the past few days. The subject line simply read, "Can we talk?" Aarav's heart rate quickened as he opened the email. The message was short, but it was enough to spark hope. "I've been thinking about the last few days. I wanted to apologize for my behavior. I was wrong to make assumptions, and I think you're doing the right thing. I'd like to have a conversation when you're ready." Aarav leaned back in his chair, staring at the email for a moment. He had expected resistance from Mr. Johnson for much longer, but maybe, just maybe, things were beginning to change. He clicked reply and wrote, "Let's talk." The road ahead would still be full of challenges, but Aarav knew that one thing was certain: he had started something that could never be undone. Change had begun, not just within the company, but within the people who worked there. Aarav Patel sat at his desk, staring out of the window as the soft hum of the office played in the background. It had been a few weeks since the layoffs had been completed, and though the scars of those difficult days were still fresh, Aarav could feel the shift in the air. The office, once full of tension and division, was now more unified, more open. The difficult decisions had been made, but they had opened the door to something better. The email from Mr. Johnson had caught him by surprise, and their meeting the following day had left Aarav feeling both cautious and hopeful. Mr. Johnson had walked into Aarav's office, his posture more open than it had been in the past. "Can we talk?" Mr. Johnson had asked, and Aarav had nodded. They sat down, and for the first time, Aarav saw a hint of vulnerability in Mr. Johnson's eyes. The man who had once been so steadfast in his prejudices was now questioning himself, seeking a path toward change. "I've been thinking a lot," Mr. Johnson had started, his voice quieter than usual. "I didn't want to admit it, but I was wrong. You're doing the right thing here, Aarav. I didn't see it at first, but I see it now. This place can be better for everyone." Aarav had felt a sense of relief wash over him. It wasn't an instant transformation, but it was a start. And that, he realized, was all he could ask for. "I appreciate your honesty, Mr. Johnson," Aarav had said. "I know it's not easy to change your mindset, especially when you've been used to seeing things a certain way. But I believe we can make this work together." The conversation had ended on a note of mutual understanding, and from that point on, Mr. Johnson began to show signs of improvement. He didn't suddenly become a paragon of equality overnight, but the walls he had built around himself began to crumble, piece by piece. The real breakthrough, however, came a week later during a team-building exercise. Aarav had organized the event not only as a way to boost morale, but as an opportunity for everyone to truly connect with each other on a personal level. It was time for the team to see beyond titles and backgrounds, to see the people behind the positions. As the group gathered in the conference room, Aarav spoke up, his voice calm and confident. "Today isn't about work. It's about us, about understanding each other and building trust. We've faced a lot of challenges recently, but we're still here. And that means something. We're in this together, and we're stronger when we stand united." The exercises began, activities that encouraged vulnerability, open dialogue, and collaboration. Aarav watched as the walls came down, piece by piece. Even Mr. Johnson participated, engaging with employees he had once ignored, sharing stories, and, for the first time, laughing genuinely with the team. Aarav could see the change, however small, in how they all interacted. It was subtle, but it was real. By the end of the day, the team was different. There was a new sense of camaraderie in the air, a sense of belonging. Aarav felt proud. This was the company he had envisioned, one where respect and equality were at the forefront. It had taken time, effort, and a great deal of patience, but they were getting there. That evening, as Aarav prepared to leave for the day, he received an unexpected call from Mr. Harris, the senior executive who had been so critical of him in the beginning. "I just wanted to say thank you," Mr. Harris said, his tone more sincere than Aarav had ever heard it. "I've been watching the changes in the office, and I've seen how much the team has come together. I think you're onto something here, Aarav. You've done what many of us didn't think was possible. You've changed the culture of this place." Aarav smiled, feeling a sense of accomplishment he hadn't fully allowed himself to feel until now. "It wasn't just me," he replied. "It was the team. They were ready for change. They just needed someone to show them that it was possible. Well, you've done it. And I think we'll all be better for it." "Thank you, Aarav." As the call ended, Aarav sat back in his chair, the weight of the day lifting from his shoulders. He knew the work wasn't done. Change never happened overnight, and there would always be challenges ahead. But for the first time since taking the job, Aarav felt a true sense of peace. He had made a difference, not just in the company's bottom line, but in the lives of the people who worked there. The company was still evolving, but Aarav was confident that the foundation for something great had been laid. He had proven that leadership wasn't just about making hard decisions, it was about inspiring others to grow, to challenge their assumptions, and to become better versions of themselves. And in that moment, Aarav realized that the greatest success wasn't in the awards or the accolades, it was in the people who had chosen to stand by him, work alongside him, and believe in the vision he had shared. The road ahead would still have its challenges, but Aarav knew he was ready for whatever came next. The journey had just begun.